So if you're looking for a step-by-step guide on how to build that new gaming PC using Ryzen 7000 series or AM5, the newest platform from AMD, you're in the right location. That's what this video is about. I'm going to show you step-by-step on how to build using this new platform from AMD. It's been a while since I did a how-to. And since they came out with a new platform with a new socket, I figured I'd take advantage of it and put together a how-to video this time, instead of just a time-lapse of a build. I will be going down through the parts as I get them installed here throughout the video. So without wasting a lot of your time, let's flip you over and we'll start showing you how to build this thing step by step. Alright guys, and start out the build here. We have the Gigabyte Aorus B650 Aorus Elite ATX motherboard here on top of the box. And we will be putting in the Ryzen 5 7600X CPU here. So let's go ahead and get this out of the clamshell packaging here. All right, and this is a lot like Intel has been for years. It is a LGA array. Got this little metal clip here. Got to push down, pull to the side, which will pop up. Then you pull this up. Now I normally leave that black cover on until it pops out on its own. As you can see, there's a little gold arrow right there on the edge of the CPU. And there's an arrow indented here in the middle. I don't know if you can see that on video or not, but up here in this corner. You match up the arrows. Set this down in very gently because you don't want to bend them pins, just like an Intel CPU. There we go. Kind of clicks down in there a little bit. Give it a little wiggle, make sure it's in there good. Pull down the top shield. You lower the lever, the black will pop off. Push it down and click it under. And there's your Ryzen 7600 CPU installed into the socket. Alright guys, and for the next thing we'll be putting in, we have G-Skill's Flare X5 DDR5 memory here. This is made for the AM5 XPO, EXPO RAM clock speeds. This is a 6500 megahertz kit, I believe. It is two 16 gig kits with a cache latency of 36. If you put in DDR4 memories, it's pretty well the same thing. You open up your clips on the two sides. You want to look on your motherboard. Every motherboard usually has this. If not, you'll have to look in your manual. But usually printed right here beside the RAM sticks. It tells you which two to populate first. In this case, we need to do the most outer one. We're going to skip one and we're going to do the other one, the next one. So it's almost like 1 and 3. You want to skip one in between. That way you can run a dual channel. Your RAM stick does have a little notch in it right here. And your RAM slot also has a little notch in it right here. You line them up. I believe this will be the right direction for it. Push one side down into it clicks. And the other side. Next stick, you do it the exact same way. Push down in there. Set down in there gently. Push the one side into it clicks. And you click in the other side. Depending on your motherboard, you may have clips on both sides, or you may only have clip on one side and the other side don't open. It just all depends on the motherboard that you're using at the time. Next for the build here, we're going to be putting in the NVMe PCI 4.0 drive. This is a Kingston drive. This is a 1 terabyte. It does go up to 3500 megabits seconds, so it's pretty fast drive. And on this particular motherboard, this may vary on your motherboard, but this motherboard has a heat sink right here that we're going to be using. You take this little screw out. This is a number 1 Phillips on these. There we go. Pull it up, lift it off. All right guys, once you got the cover off, this may vary on your, depending on your motherboard. This one here's got a little black clip back here. You got to push up to open up that clip. You have a notch here in your drive, and there's a little piece of plastic down here inside the notch. This goes in at about 45-degree angle or so to get down in there right. Make sure you don't see no gold sticking out here at the connection point. Push this down, and you push that little clip down, and it's installed. The way that these drives install vary depending on your motherboard. Some of them have something like this. Some of them have a little clip that you rotate. Some of them you have to take the screw out and put the screw back in. It just all depends on your motherboard. Now, since we got that done, we will be pulling off this little piece of plastic off the heat shield or the heat sink for the M.2 drive. I'll put it back down here in this little slot to cover up the drive. That way we don't have to look at the collar of the drive. And you put the screw back down into it there, just like that. And your NVMe drive is installed. Alright guys, now since we've got the motherboard pretty well all prepped, everything needs on it, we will be installing the AIO that we're putting in the system. We have the Ergo AT240 we will be putting on the system to keep that CPU cool. Now this will depend on your particular air cooler or your all-in-one that you're using. Just make sure you read the manual on your particular cooler on how to install it. Being AM5 socket, you will need a air cooler or a CPU cooler that uses the included back plate with the AM5 motherboard. To be able to remove them back plate and use a different back plate, you have to undo your CPU hold down tension plate, and I don't recommend doing that. You take a lot of risk of messing something up by doing that, so I'd recommend not doing it. Just get you a air cooler or a all-in-one cooler that does take advantage of the back plate that's already built into the motherboard. Let's go ahead and we'll take these two little clips off here, these two little plastic clips. We won't be needing them for this particular cooler. So you take out the screws. And you take the plastic piece off. Now your air cooler or your all-in-one may actually take advantage of these little plastic clips. If it does, of course you'll need to leave yours on. Alright, we got the plates off. Now depending on the cooler you got, I've already used this cooler a couple different times, so there's no thermal paste on it, so I have to add my own thermal paste. So for thermal paste, we have MX5 here today. We're going to pull this off, and we're just going to put some right here in the very middle of it here. I'm not too sure on how much you actually need. They usually say pea size or rice grain job right there in the middle. A lot of people say that's good enough, and let the heat spreader spread it out. If you see any of my other videos, I do spread mine out to make sure I have complete coverage. So I will be taking my spatula here, and I will be spreading this out to make sure I get good coverage. This all depends on you and how you want to feel about it, or what you think about it, or who you want to listen to. But I'll make sure I spread mine out, that way I know I have good complete coverage, and if I have too much I can always wipe it off, and if I don't have enough I can always add a little bit more to it. Let me get this spread out and I'll be back. Alright, I think that's a pretty good application of thermal paste. Now depending on the way your cooler attaches, this will still vary depending on the cooler that you're using and the way it attaches. This one here, I got to line up my screw holes and put these spring loaded screws down through them. So we want to start up here in the corner up here and just get a couple threads going. We don't need it real tight right now, we're just trying to get them all started. Okay, there's two of them started. Okay, there's that one lined up. Okay, there's all four of them started. Now we're just going to take our screwdriver, a couple turns on each one. You don't need a whole lot. And we're going to do this in a cross pattern. That way you don't get put too much pressure on one side or the other. Just keep going back and forth, a couple turns each. And you'll feel that, they'll feel somewhat tight. And when you go back and touch them, they won't be as tight as what you thought they was. That's because you're putting pressure on the other side of it. So it won't, so it kind of loosens up the opposite corner. You don't need these real tight, guys. You just need to snug these down pretty good. A lot of guys actually just finger tighten them, but me, I like to use a screwdriver and give them a nice little tighten. Alright, I believe that'll do it. That's the motherboard all prepped up and ready to go. Let me get the case over here, and we will get putting this thing in the case with the power supply and the GPU that's going in the system. Alright guys, and here we have the case that we're going to be using in today's example for this build. This is the Neo G by Motherboard. This is also made by Fantex. This is the only full-size case I had. So this is what we're going to use. I'm going to go ahead and take the side panels off here. Loosen up the thumb screws, pull the panel up off. You're gonna flip it over here. We're gonna do the same on the back. Loosen up the thumb screws here. Pull the panels back a little bit. Lift it up off. Put it to the side. Since I will be using the 240 AIO in this, I will have to take them front fans out. So we will be having to take the front panel off here. And I will be relocating these front fans. And the way your case comes apart will vary depending on your case. So I'm not really walking you through that really. Pull the drive sled bay out here. Get the box of goodies. We'll need the standoffs and the motherboard screws out of that box. Put that back in. Let's go ahead and get rid of these front panels here. All right, now since we need to take them front fans out, we need to undo some of this cabling in here and see where them cables lie. All right, now since we've got the cables loose, I'm gonna take my Phillips here and take the 4 screws out for this. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now that fan should pull out fairly easy. Should, what should be and is bees, 2 different bees of course. There we go. We will be relocating these inside the case, so we will keep a hold of them. Okay, all the screws out of that one. See if we can get the cables up out of it. There we go. I'll lay that one to the side as well. Okay, now our case is pretty well prepped for what we need to do here. All right, guys, we have our case laid down here, and we also have our motherboard laid over here that's already prepped and ready for install. You see these little standoffs standing up here. I've already did mine off camera. You need to make sure them line up with the screw holes in your motherboard, like these little holes right here. This is what will be connecting your motherboard to the case. You want to make sure you have the right amount and in the right locations. If one of these is underneath that motherboard where there ain't a screw hole, it could short something out and damage your motherboard. And that wouldn't be a good thing. Depending on your case, some of them come pre-installed, some don't. You just have to make sure they all line up right. Check it 2 or 3 times if you have to make sure them screws, them standoffs do line up with the screw holes in your motherboard. It is a very important step. It is something not to overlook. So just make sure you do that. Depending on your motherboard, the motherboard we have today has a built-in IO shield, which will go in this hole right here. If your motherboard don't have the built-in IO shield, you will need to put in your IO shield before installing your motherboard. But I can't show you any of that in this video because my motherboard's got it built in. Inside of the box or the baggie of goodies that come in your case, depending on your case, you will need enough of these screws. You need 1 for each of the standoffs to hold your motherboard down. I went ahead and counted mine out. So I have 9 standoffs, so I got 9 screws, and I know I got 9 screw holes in my motherboard, and they do all line up right. Like I said, this is very important. You do not want to overlook this step. We're going to go ahead and set the motherboard down in here. You need to put it down in here a little bit of an angle and slide it over until your standoff points line up right. Just like so. And I don't know if you can see that on camera, but you can look down through your screw holes on your motherboard, and you should be able to see the standoffs kind of through the edge of the motherboard there. Now, if you do have to put in the IO shield beforehand, after you get your motherboard in, you do want to look at your IO shield back here and make sure there ain't no metal grounding straps inside the ports. If there is, that port will not be able to be used. So you want to make sure there's no grounding straps inside your ports, depending on the way the back shield is made for your motherboard. You can do this with a regular number 2 Phillips screwdriver, but I'd recommend getting your extension bit. It just makes it a little bit easier and a little bit nicer to get down into some of these. Especially if there's some that's real close to your RAM kit or something like that, or down around this heat shield back here. You know, your IO shield cover back here. It's kind of nice to have a little bit of extra extension to be able to get to those. Just like anything else that I do, I get one of them started. I don't tighten it down very much, just a couple threads, just enough to hold the motherboard. There is no particular order on these, but you want to just get them started just enough to hold it in spot. but still loose enough. If you need to, you can still move the motherboard a little bit, because sometimes you will have to wiggle the motherboard around to get all the screw holes to line up, and that's fine. That's normal, ain't no big deal. I'll go ahead and cut to the port to where I have them all started, and then I'll be back. And also, guys, when I talk about the screwdriver, I do recommend a magnetic tip screwdriver for this. That magnet ain't strong enough to hurt anything. Now, since we got them all started, I'm just gonna go back and I'm just gonna finish tightening these down. Just a few turns. You just want them, I don't know, finger tight. You don't want to break your motherboard. You don't want to break any of the traces in your motherboard. Again, there is no right or wrong order to actually tighten these down. But since you got them all started, you don't have to worry about moving the motherboard around. So you just go back and kind of tighten them down as you see fit, or whichever ones you want to hit whenever you want to hit them. Let me get the rest of these tightened down and I'll be back. Alright guys, now since we've got the motherboard installed and it's screwed down good and snug, it ain't going no place. Now we're going to deal with the AIO, which if you ain't using an AIO, you can skip this section of the video if you like. And this is also going to be very dependent on your case, your use case scenario, the all-in-one that you're using. Me, like I said, I am using the Ergo AT240. And due to this case, I can't put it in the top like I'd like to. So I'm going to have to go front mounted here. And depending on your AIO and the case that you're using, in my particular case, we can put the fans on the outside like this. And we're going to use the long screws. We're going to go through the case, through the fan, and into the AIO itself. Or we could use the fans on the inside of it and use these just to secure the fans, and use the shorter screws to connect the radiator to the front of the case. All depends on your case, your scenario, how your AIO is set up. Alright guys, after about an hour of fighting with it, I cannot get them fans to line up with the case holes, to line up with the radiator to put them through. So I am going to do this a different way. There ain't going to be a lot of AOGB in the front of the case through the front panel of it. But at this point, I don't care. We will be taking the fans and we will be mounting them to the back of the radiator, just like so. And then we will be mounting the radiator to the case with the smaller screws. So that's the way we're going to do it in this build. Let me get the fan started into the radiator here. Hopefully this goes better than the other side did. There we go. One started there. I'm gonna have to put these wires back through here. And we'll get this screw started. And then we will get this screw started. And we will get this screw started. Get this hair fan started. And get that one started. Now since they're all started, we'll go ahead and snug these down. They don't have to be real tight, just snug. Just about wrist tight, just like everything else on a computer. And the one thing you do want to make sure of, if you're putting it on the front of the case, you want to make sure these brackets on your fan is facing towards the inside of the case. That way it's sucking air in to the front of the case and out the back of the case. If you flip these around and put these towards the outside of the case on the front, it'll actually be an exhaust fan. And you want most of your airflow to be one way. You want it to come in through the front and out through the back or up through the top. That's one thing you gotta keep in mind when installing your fans. Okay, now we'll pull all the cabling back through. Yes, we just put 8 screws in, and yes, we have another 8 to put back in again. So let's get one of these little screws started here. It's gonna go through the case and into the radiator here. There's that one started. Get us another one. There we go. And I'll be back when I get the rest of them started, guys. Alright guys, I got all of the screws started and I'm just gonna go back and snug these down. These don't have to be extremely tight either. These just wrist tight. You know, you ain't sealing against water or air. Just need to make sure that they're going to be good enough to hold down any vibrations or anything that you may get. You know, make sure it's well secured to the case. And I do it like I do everything else, just a couple turns on each one, then go back and hit them a couple different times, make sure they're snug. And it really don't matter about the pattern. Me personally, I try to keep it in a cross pattern type format. I don't think it really 100% matters on these, because all you're doing is securing the radiator and the fans to the case at this point. Alright guys, now since we got the motherboard installed, we got the all-in-one installed here. Before we start the cabling, we need to get the power supply installed. We have the EVGA 650 GQ power supply. I've had this for quite a while. It's actually been home in my test rig. The PSU actually picked up for this build, which I probably could still use it, but this motherboard's got the 8-pin and a 4-pin connector for the CPU right up here. Got an 8-pin and a 4-pin. And this power supply is the only one I have that has two CPU headers on it, or 2 CPU cables on it. The one I picked up for the build don't have 2, which I think you can get away with just using the one 8-pin. But to be able to get the motherboard and CPU as much power when I do my testing, I want to make sure it's got all the power it could use. So let's go ahead and get this PSU installed here. I want to see what I got to do to get you guys a shot of this. This is going to vary from case to case as well. Some cases has a bracket back here that's got to be pulled off, mounted to the PSU, then the PSU slides in. This one here is more of an old school style, to where the PSU slides in from the inside and you put the screws to it to hold it. The main thing you want to keep in mind, if you ain't going to have your computer on the floor, which I hope you don't, is to make sure you put your fan for your PSU facing down. That way you can suck in fresh air. But if you're going to have it on carpet or something like that, you go ahead and get it facing upwards. That way you don't suck all the dust up out of your carpet. But I'd recommend facing the fan downward and not putting your PC on carpet myself. We'll go ahead and get these cables started down in here and get this slid up in here, because this is the old school style. Just like so. Okay, gonna try to do this and get you guys a shot of it, which may not be the easiest thing because of my setup here. And the screws for it will come with the power supply, or your case will furnish the screws for you, either way. And you just get one started like I do everything else. I get one started there. Okay, then we'll get another one started down here in the opposite corner. Just enough to hold it, because you may need to move it a little bit to get the other holes to line up. If you haven't noticed, that's a pretty good theme for me. That's the way I do most of my builds. Just get them started, and then I'll go back and tighten them all down. And I try to use a cross pattern for everything, which something like this really don't matter. The only thing that really matters on is the CPU cooler, but it's just a good habit to get into. Now since they're all started, I'll go ahead and tighten that one down. And we'll tighten this one down, and we'll snug this one down. And then again, these are just wrist tight. They don't have to be extremely tight. You don't want to shear them off or nothing like that, especially if you're going to be moving your computer around a lot. The more you tighten them down, the more likely you are to shear or something when you're moving it around. You just want to make sure it's a good snug in there and it ain't going to be moving. That looks pretty good to me. These are the 2 fans that came out of the case. Just like I showed you on the fans for your AIO, you need to make sure these brackets is facing outwards towards the outside of the case. That way they're sucking air in this way and blowing air that way. These actually have little arrows on you showing you which way the fan spins and which way the air goes. Not all fans will have that, but most cases, the fans that's got the brackets, the side that's got the brackets on the fan, will be the exhaust side. We're going to be putting one up here on the top, probably like that, and we'll be using one back here in the very back. I'll probably give us a little bit of a neutral airflow, or probably even a possible negative airflow, because the fans in the front got pulled through that radiator, which me personally, I'd prefer a positive air pressure. But this is what we got, and I don't have another one of these fans to put up here to put 3 outtakes and 2 in, which still end up being a negative pressure. So yeah, to get the ARGB that everybody has to have, well, this is the way we're going to do it. I'm going to put one here in the back and one right here in this back slot back here. I don't want to put it up here too far, which there is a hole here for another one, but I really don't want to put it up there for the simple fact of you need the air pressure towards the back of the case instead of up towards the front of the case for the exhaust, if you can. But after looking at that, I think we need to put in any cables that we need up in this corner. Looks like it's going to be awful tight to run the cables once we get the fans put in here. So we will go ahead and run them CPU fan headers up here, or the CPU cables up here, and get them connected just to make it easier on ourselves. Alright guys, I got my 2 cables here for my CPU headers up here on the top of the motherboard. I'm going to put them up through this hole here. I'm going to flip it over here. This may be a little bit of a side angle or something for you, but I'm going to try to get you a shot of me getting these plugged in. Alright guys, you got an 8-pin and a 4-pin CPU connector up here, right here. And the power supply has 2 different connectors for this. They're both 8-pin, or cut in 2 to make 4 pins, so we'll use 1.5 of them. I don't know if I can get you a shot. There is a clip on the side of the connector and a clip on the side of the cabling. You have to make sure them clips are lined up right, or it won't go into the holes. Let's get this spinning around here. Get this one installed. It click. There we go, it clicked. That was the 8-pin. Now we're just going to take one of these single 4 pins here and plug into that other 4-pin header. And it's the same way as the 8-pin. They do have clips on them, so you have to make sure they're lined up right. Yeah, I'm glad I decided to do this before putting them fans in. With them fans in there, this would have been a lot harder, and it's hard enough as it is. There we go, clipped in. All right, we'll push that extra one, just push it back in there someplace. It should be all right. All right, now with that done, now we can put the fans in. And of course, these fans are ARGB fans, so we have 2 cables there we have to run out the back before we can even start putting the screws to them. So let's see what we have to do to get these cables out. There's that one. And there's that one. Okay, and this fan's gonna go back here, so we need these cables ran out the same hole. They run the cable through, and the lovely ARGB cable that everybody has to have, because everybody has to have the fancy lights that they never change, even though they're capable of it. And everybody says that they just have to have them, and you know, the lovely stuff. Yeah, candy tag gaming system, right? Gotta have the ARGB or it ain't a gaming rig anymore. Alright, now we got the cables ran out through there. And the same 4 screws that we used to take the fans out with, it's the same 4 screws we're going to put them back in with. And this one started, and we'll just go ahead and snug this one down. Again, these are just going about wrist tight. Don't need them real tight, just enough to hold the fan in there. Okay, there's that one done. Now we'll go ahead and install this very back one as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and slide this fan all the way down here as far as it can slide. Then we're just going to tighten them up. And again, wrist tight. They don't have to be extremely tight. Alright, there we go. Fans is reinstalled. Here we go, guys. We're going to get into some of this cable management, cable routing here. Hooking up the main cables for the system here in the front of the, or to the motherboard anyways. I'm going to show you the front, and I will end up eventually flipping it over and showing you what the back end looks like, what I got to deal with it. Let's go ahead and get started here. First thing is, down here in this corner, the only thing this case has got is the power switch button, which is nice. So you line that up with the power switch pins here inside your front panel connector. You slip it down on there. Now, most cases will have a power LED, a hard drive activity light, a reset button. This one, it's only got the one power switch button, so it makes it kind of nice for this case. And over here, we got your front port audio that leads up to here for your hook up into the audio, which on our motherboards down here. You look at that connector, you do have one pin that's blocked out, and there won't be a pin there on the motherboard as well. So there's only one connection it can go into, and along with only one way it can go into. So we'll go ahead and plug it in. I don't know who uses front port audio, but we have it, so we will be plugging it in today. Okay, there we go. And I'll show you guys this when I flip it over. We do have one ARGB here for all them ARGB lights everybody has to have. We do have an ARGB connector down here on the bottom, right here. Just match up the pin layout the right way. It is a 3-pin, 5-volt system. I used to think that USB 3 was the most BS connector they ever put on a motherboard until they came out with ARGB. There we go. Them two's hooked up. You got your front panel hooked up here in the bottom, so that's all done up. This particular motherboard has got a right angle USB 3 type port on it, which this is the blue connector coming off your case. It's got this notch on it. You line up them notches. In this case, you got that little metal borer right there in the way, so it's making it a little complicated to get it plugged in. There we go, it's in there. And right angle connector on them does make it pretty nice. There's the cable for the GPU. That ain't installed yet, so we can't do that one yet. Right up here, I don't know if you can see it. No, them hoses may be in your way. This is your 24-pin, your main motherboard connector. It does have a clip on one side. Here's your 20+4 connector from your PSU, from your power supply. Line them up, put the clips on the same side. Push it down on until you hear it click. Give it a little tug, make sure it's on there good. That's on there good. I don't know how well you can see these on video. We do have the PMW fan header here. This does hook up into a fan splitter in the back, which I'll show you here in a second. We want to plug it into the CPU fan header. If you don't have a PMW signal on that fan, on that CPU fan header, a lot of times it will throw a code. Every time you go in, you have to go into your BIOS to bypass it. It's just easier to have a 4-pin connection on it. And here is our cable for the water pump head. That's what actually gives the pump power to be able to move the fluid. And it's just it's a regular DC fan header, 3-pin. And we're going to connect it to the CPU optional fan header here. That way it's also controlled through whatever your CPU is doing. Push the excess cable back through a little bit. All right, that was nice and easy, wasn't it? That's all the front cabling in the front that needs connected besides the GPU power, which we will get to when we get the GPU installed into the system. Made it look easy, didn't I? Well, I'm gonna flip it over here and I'm gonna show you what the back side of it looks like, and you tell me how easy it actually is. Due to having 4 fans, this is the only fan splitter I got left. I gotta get some more ordered. I had to put a fan splitter in here, which the cable runs up here and runs through here. That hooks up to that CPU fan. That way all the fans is controlled by the CPU. Okay, so I had to add that in because my cables on the fans themselves ain't long enough to reach the motherboard header, so I had to use a fan controller or a fan switch to be able to hook up all the fans. For the ARGB, you see me plug in one ARGB header in the front of it. Well, I had to put this splitter on there to be able to run all the ARGB, which you could maybe cut down on some of this because they do have the pigtails to where you can daisy chain some of them together. Because there's so much ARGB in the system, you have to have some kind of splitter or some kind of controller like this for ARGB to be able to hook all your ARGBs up. I got some work to do back here on the cable management, so we'll go ahead and get the GPU installed. For the GPU we're putting in today's build, we have the Power Collar Fighter RX 6600. That's going to be the GPU going in this system. They pretty well all installed the same way. The only thing maybe difference, depending on what size of the GPU is going to be how many connectors you need for it. And this is also going to vary some depending on your case layout. I've already used this case, so mine's already broken out back here for the back panel that needs token out. See if I can get you a picture of that. But normally you would just set your, let's get the hoses out of the way, get that cable out of the way, kind of line it up from the back, see which ones are going to need removed. Then you remove the back slot covers as needed, depending on how your cord lines up. Depending on your case is how this is going to vary. Mine, I have this little back cover here I got to remove, or I guess you could just pull it up. All right, guys, I'm going to have to remove this bolt, this thumb screw right here. which it looks like this case has got an extra slot cover missing out of it. Okay, so you gotta pull that bolt out. And depending on your case, like this one, it'd probably be easier just for me to remove this panel than to fight with it. But, you know, I like making everything harder on myself. Take them 2 screws out, then you remove them slot covers or break them out, depending on your case situation. Inside here, inside your 16 slot, you got this little lever back here, and you make sure it's in the open position. Slide down in here. Line up at about 16 slot here. Get lined up good and just give it a nice little shove. Then you should hear that click when that goes shut. It's in there pretty good. On this particular case, we're going to take our thumb screws and put them back in here. Make sure it's good and secure to the case. That one started. That metal plate. And then we'll get this one started. Go ahead and snug this one down. And we'll snug this one on down. Now your GPU is good and secure. We'll go ahead and put this plate back down. And tighten down this screw. And we'll tighten down this screw. There we go. Cord is nice and snug in there and secure to the case. Now this is the 6600, so it's only got one 8-pin, which is the PCI Express cable I got here. As you can tell, the PCI Express is different from the CPU pin cable layout. The one for the GPU is a 6+2 pin, where the CPU is also an 8-pin, but it's split 4x4. So you want to make sure you get the right cable ran through your system that you need for your GPU, and as many pins as it needs. It may take one of these, it may take 2 of these, it may take 1.5 of these. It's all going to vary on your GPU. We do have a clip here, and we have a ridge down here that needs to be clipped into. So we will connect these two the way they're supposed to be. Just line them up with the pins and the clips. Line them up there and push it down in. You will hear it clip, or you should hear it click, and it's in there good and strong. All right, guys, that's going to be pretty well it for right now. But give me a second here. I'll get reset up, and we'll get hooked up to the monitor. We'll make sure it's boost before we finish up the process. All right, guys, there it is. Let's go ahead and get this thing buttoned up, and we'll get some Glamour shots of it for you, show you what the finished product actually looks like. We're gonna go ahead and put the front panel and the side panels back on it here. So let's get the cover here for the front of it. We'll snap it into place here maybe, if we can get the holes to line up. There we go. Then the front cover of it, get it lined up. We'll get it snapped on. The back panel, there's the cable management. That ain't my best cable management job, but it ain't my worst. I think it turned out pretty good for a system that's only going to be tested and ripped back apart. I think that'll do all right. I'm not selling the system right away or anything. So yeah, I think that'll be an all right cable management for what it is for right now. Let's see if the back panel will go back on it here. That's the main thing with cable management, right? It should go on with no with little hiccups anyways, hopefully. There we go. Now it's back on there, I think. Put the screws in there. Flip it around here. Put the glass side panel on the front of it. Now I did notice with the first boot up on it, it is defaulted to white LEDs. I'm assuming the motherboard has chosen that color, which I think it looks pretty good in white actually. I ain't gonna put windows or anything on it right now, so the Glamour shots will be with the white LEDs on it. But I think it lights up the inside pretty nice, and you can actually see some of the components. I don't know what I'm going to actually do with them hoses. I'll probably just leave them as is, I guess. But I think that looks pretty good like that. I think it'll end up being a pretty good looking little system. Get it back there. There you go. Now you can see it. But yeah, guys, that's the way you build an AM5 7600X gaming computer. Let me get some Glamour shots of it and whatnot for you. And I'll be back to finish up the video. Alright everyone, so that's the way you build a gaming PC using the new platform from AMD. I was going to do this as a budget build for AM5 or the Ryzen 7000 series processor, but to tell you the truth, there really ain't nothing budget about getting in on this platform. The day of the filming, if you bought everything that I put in this system, it'd cost you about $1,300, and that's including the used price on the 6600 that I put in the system. I ain't even including the new price. If you're going to buy a new GPU, it'd even be more than that. It's just the price of the AM5 motherboards and DDR5 is so expensive that you really can't get into the AM5 on a decent budget. I was wrong on the RAM. That RAM kit is not a 6000 megahertz kit. It is a 5600 megahertz kit. I did that just to save some money, because if you go from the 5600 megahertz RAM up to the 6000 megahertz RAM, it's like a $60 price increase just for that little bit of extra speed and RAM. And I know AMD says that the 6000 megahertz RAM kits is going to be ideal for their new processors. Maybe I'll get one of them RAM kits in the future and we'll do some testing to see how true that actually holds out. But everybody knows Ryzen's always been pretty picky about the RAM speeds and having a big impact on the performance of the CPUs. That is how to build a gaming PC using this new platform from AMD. If you'd like to be notified when the other videos on this computer come out, like the benchmarks, the BIOS updates, and all the other videos I have in mind for this system, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn the notification bell on. That way you're notified when they drop. There's some links in the description below that may interest you. Don't forget to do all that fun YouTube stuff on your way out of here. You all have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video or live stream.